It was the summer of 2008 when 24-year-old Jennifer Patterson made the biggest decision of her life, purchasing her first home. Set on 5 acres of rolling countryside, the property seemed like something out of a dream. A quaint house with a barn, a stocked pond glistening in the back, and a wraparound porch that caught the evening light just right. For Jennifer, who had always wanted to keep her horses close, her decision was sealed after hearing about the house from her father, who had been in touch with someone selling their late father's estate. The home, though older, had character. Exposed wooden beams, rustic touches, and plenty of space for someone starting fresh. Jennifer could already picture quiet mornings feeding her horses and peaceful nights under the stars. Before even moving in, she took a friend from work to see the house. It was empty then, just her and her friend walking through the quiet halls. But something strange happened. As they entered from the garage, her friend froze. "Who else is here?" she asked, glancing toward the hallway at the back of the house. Jennifer laughed. "No one, just us." But her friend insisted. She had seen someone, a shadowy figure moving from one room to another. Jennifer brushed it off, blaming nerves or imagination. Old houses creak. They cast strange shadows, she thought. It was probably nothing. She chose not to dwell on it. After all, she had plans. She wanted to build a life here, host friends, ride her horses, start anew. The old house had a charm she couldn't resist. Sure, it smelled faintly like a nursing home and needed a little cleaning, but it was hers. She loved the beams, the hardwood floors, the quirky layout. It felt like a place meant for her. But behind the charm was something else, something that watched from the corners, lingered in the air, and followed just out of sight, something that would soon make itself known. As she began to move in, Jennifer noticed something odd. In the master bedroom, where the scent of old age lingered, there was a sudden, overwhelming waft of strong, outdated aftershave. Old Spice, the kind your grandfather might have worn, filled the air, even though no one else was there. And every time she turned around, the scent came again, as if someone, or something, was walking right behind her. Not long after settling in, Jennifer began to feel that the house had a life of its own. It wasn't loud or obvious at first, just whispers, faint and fleeting, like wind curling through cracks in the walls. But they always came when the house should have been silent. She'd return from work, step inside, and freeze. Voices, low, murmuring conversation. She couldn't make out words, just the undeniable rhythm of people talking. But the TV was off. She didn't own a working radio, and she lived alone. She would walk toward the sound, only for it to vanish before she could trace it. Then, just as quickly, it would pick up again in another room, always a few feet ahead, always just out of reach. At night, the voices became more persistent. Lying in bed, Jennifer would stare into the dark, listening to them rise up from across the hallway, sometimes just outside her door. The tone was casual, as if neighbors were chatting by a fence. But she had no neighbors nearby. She lived in the countryside, surrounded by empty space and horses. Even more unsettling than the voices was the music. It would creep into the air with no clear source, soft and twangy like something off a dusty vinyl. Not modern country, but the kind of tunes you'd hear echoing out of an old wooden radio in the 1930s or 40s. She would check the windows, wondering if a car had driven by. But there were no headlights, no visitors. Just the sound of distant strings and sorrowful voices drifting through the walls. Then there was the smell. It was always strongest in the hallway, an unmistakable wave of musty aftershave, thick and clinging. It followed her like a person would, showing up suddenly when she turned around. It wasn't coming from the vents. It wasn't from anything left behind. It was in the air, moving on its own. Jennifer tried to explain it away. Stress, perhaps. Or maybe the isolation was playing tricks on her mind. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. She wasn't just imagining things. Something in the house was trying to be noticed. The subtle cues turned into a quiet pattern. A presence she could feel, almost predict. She'd walk into a room and pause, expecting something to happen. And when it didn't, that was often worse than when it did, because it meant the house was waiting too. Jennifer decided that maybe what she needed was a fresh memory, something to overwrite the creeping sense of unease. A housewarming party seemed perfect. Friends, Laughter, music, something human and grounded, something alive. She invited a small group, keeping it casual. Drinks, music, snacks, a little tour of her new place. One friend brought another guest along, her boyfriend. Jennifer didn't think much of it at first. He was polite, quiet, the kind of person who seemed to observe more than he spoke. That changed when he cornered her midway through the evening. "There are people in this house," he said suddenly, eyes wide, like he was watching something invisible behind her. Jennifer gave a half laugh. "Yeah, it's a party. Kind of the point." But he shook his head. "No, not alive. They don't want you here. This is their house." The words hit like a cold splash of water. Jennifer blinked, confused, expecting a smirk or some punchline. But he wasn't joking. His expression didn't shift. Her voice caught. "Excuse me?" "A man and a woman," he said. "They don't want you here." She stood frozen for a beat before brushing him off. Awkward smile, a nod, walking away with a drink in hand and a heart racing in her chest. She wouldn't see him for the rest of the night. He vanished into the crowd like a ghost himself, never to be found again. But her friend remained, as did her friends plus one. The next day, Jennifer brought it up. "Hey, your friend's boyfriend, he's interesting." "Oh yeah," her friend said. "He's a psychic. He told me what he said to you." Jennifer blinked. "Is he legit?" A shrug. "Who knows? He's sensitive to things, I guess." Jennifer wanted to laugh it off, but the knot in her stomach told a different story. She hadn't mentioned the voices, the music, the smells. She hadn't told anyone yet, but he had known. Somehow, he had known. After that, the atmosphere in the house shifted again, slightly sharper, like the air before a storm. The silence after the party wasn't peaceful, it was loaded. Jennifer stopped feeling like the homeowner and more like a guest, or worse, an intruder. Something had been revealed at that party, something that could no longer be ignored. And in that silence, the house waited for the next move. As the unease in the house grew heavier, Jennifer confided in a co-worker, casually at first. She didn't dive into the ghost stories or shadowy figures, just a mention here, a detail there. But what her co-worker revealed sent a chill deeper than any cold draft ever could. "Oh, you bought that house?" the co-worker said. "I knew the family who lived there." Jennifer leaned in, curious but cautious. They were old-fashioned, very religious. The man, Carl Johnson, he built the house himself for his wife and their kids. They actually lived in the basement while he was building the upper floors. Jennifer nodded slowly. "Really?" The woman continued, voice softening. "His wife died in what's now your bedroom." Jennifer stopped breathing for a moment. "She was everything to him," the coworker said. "He never really recovered. Wouldn't even use the dishwasher after she passed. Said she was the only one who could do it right. He just sat in that living room every day, mourning. Until he died, too. It felt like puzzle pieces sliding into place, pieces Jennifer hadn't even known were missing. Carl Johnson had passed away exactly 1 year before she moved in. The voices, the aftershave, the music, the strong religious energy, the disapproval, the sorrow. Jennifer had assumed the place was just an old house with a little character, but now it seemed it was something else entirely. An emotional monument built by a grieving man, occupied by memories too strong to let go. She thought back to her own experiences. The overwhelming scent of cologne, could it have been his? The voices, his wife, the music, perhaps theirs, echoing from a life gone but not forgotten. Jennifer tried to reassure herself. "If it is haunted," she said aloud, "maybe it's just them. They loved the house. Maybe they're still here, just watching over it." But even as she tried to rationalize it, something twisted inside her. Because love doesn't shove you downstairs. Love doesn't whisper in the dark, or throw shadows across windows, or murmur from locked rooms in the middle of the night. Love doesn't scare you into silence. Still, she pushed forward, fixing things, decorating, trying to make it feel like home. But it was like moving furniture in someone else's room. Every step, every change seemed to provoke a response, as if something deep within the walls didn't just remember the Johnsons. It belonged to them. After learning about the Johnsons, Jennifer couldn't help but feel every creak of the floorboards differently. Each sound had weight, each silence had presence, and the house, once charming and cozy, now felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. The voices grew bolder. They no longer whispered just when she came home. Now they spoke when she was already inside, when she was reading in bed, folding laundry, brushing her teeth. Full conversations echoed through rooms where no one stood. She never caught full sentences, just overlapping murmurs, the cadence unmistakably human. Sometimes she would be lying in bed and hear voices in the adjacent room. It was like standing outside a closed door while someone talked just beyond it. By the time she got up and looked, the room would be empty, but her chest would still be tight, like the house was watching her react. One night, as she washed dishes with the TV off and only the hum of the refrigerator for company, she heard it again. Music. The same warbling, distant country twang she'd heard before, faint and crackling like it had traveled decades to reach her. She rushed to the window. No headlights, no passing cars, just the quiet expanse of her land and the lingering sound of a song that had no source. She began to keep the lights on more often, not for visibility, but for reassurance, as though the glow might push back the shadows. But even light had its limits. She could feel the cold spots, like someone had opened a freezer beside her, though no windows were open. Sometimes she would walk through one of those spots and shudder, like she had brushed against something unseen. Then came the attic. One evening, Jennifer noticed the attic door wasn't fully shut. She walked over, pushed it closed, and gave it a firm tug to make sure it latched. Satisfied, she returned to the couch where her two dogs were sleeping soundly. A moment later, bang! The attic door slammed open with such force it struck the wall behind it. Her dogs bolted upright, barking violently. The hair on their backs stood up straight, as though they could see something Jennifer couldn't. They charged the staircase, barking up into the attic with unrelenting fury. Jennifer sat frozen. Her heart raced. Her mind screamed to move, to check, but her body refused. She had never seen her dogs react that way. Not to a noise, not to anything. Whatever had opened that attic door wasn't a draft. It wasn't old hinges. It wasn't her imagination. It was real, and it was angry. By now, Jennifer was no longer questioning whether something was wrong with the house. The voices, the music, the shadowy figures, they were no longer isolated events. They formed a chain, tightening around her daily life. Still, she tried to coexist with it, to pretend it wasn't as bad as it seemed. That illusion shattered the day she went down to the basement to do laundry. The basement had always felt different from the rest of the house, damp, colder, and somehow heavier, like the air itself had aged. Molded wooden panels lined parts of the walls, rotted from years of unnoticed flooding. Jennifer decided to help her parents by removing some of the decaying panels. As she peeled back the first one, a voice whispered, soft but unmistakable. "Get out!" She froze, breath caught halfway between disbelief and terror. The room was empty. The dogs were upstairs. No one else was home. Maybe it was just in her head, she told herself. Stress, audio hallucinations. It's possible, right? She kept pulling at the next panel. "Get out!" This time it was louder, firmer, almost shouted, right next to her ear. She didn't wait. She turned to bolt up the stairs, but halfway up, something grabbed her leg. Not brushed, not tripped, grabbed. She could feel the pressure of fingers wrapping around her ankle, cold and firm. It yanked just enough to send her scrambling in panic, clawing up the rest of the staircase. She slammed the basement door shut behind her and collapsed on the floor, heart hammering against her ribs. For the first time, she said it out loud. "My house is haunted." There was no longer any room for denial. The house wasn't just expressing discomfort or sorrow. It was reacting to her, intervening, touching, warning. And it wasn't just voices and smells anymore. It had turned physical. She told herself maybe it was a muscle spasm, a freak accident, a panic response. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She had felt fingers. She had felt intent. And it wasn't the last time it would happen. The basement, she later learned, had been where the Johnson family lived during construction, where they ate, slept, raised their children. It was a sacred place to them. And now, Jennifer was tearing it apart. Perhaps that was the final straw for the spirit that lingered there. Perhaps the warning hadn't been metaphorical. It had been literal, and she had ignored it. Amidst the escalating chaos, Jennifer found a small flicker of hope, connection. Her co-worker Sean, who had listened with genuine curiosity to her strange experiences, slowly became more than a confidant. What began as casual conversation turned into something deeper. After the end of a previous relationship, she and Sean started seeing each other. He was logical, grounded, and didn't scare easily. When he asked to move in, it felt like a new chapter. Someone to share the weight of the house with. Someone who might make things feel normal again. But instead, the moment he moved in, everything got worse. It began subtly. A sudden swarm of flies in the children's bedroom, just that room. They cleaned, scrubbed, sprayed. The flies came back. Every day, Jennifer would vacuum them up, dozens of them. And every morning, there would be more. No smell, no rot, no source. Sean, ever the skeptic, searched for logical explanations. Was there a dead animal behind the wall? Some environmental factor drawing them in? But nothing made sense. And the infestation was oddly selective. Only that one room. Only after Sean moved in. Jennifer couldn't help but think back to what she had learned about the Johnsons, their deep religious convictions. Maybe it wasn't just the renovations upsetting the spirits. Maybe they disapproved of her living with a man she wasn't married to. It didn't end with flies. One night, the two were watching TV. To the left of the screen was a hallway leading to the bedrooms. At the end of that hallway, on a top pantry shelf, was a deflated air mattress pump. It had sat undisturbed for weeks. Without warning, the device flew across the hallway and slammed into the opposite wall. It didn't fall. It didn't tumble. It launched, clearing 3 feet of space and hitting the wall nearly level with where it had been stored. Sean stood up, staring in disbelief. The object had not dropped. It had moved horizontally, deliberately. Jennifer looked to him, expecting a rational explanation. But this time he had none. He was the kind of man who believed in science and measurement, who took things apart to understand them. And yet, as he stood in the hallway staring at the wall, he was silent. "I can't explain that," he finally said. "Now I understand what you've been trying to tell me." From that moment on, the house no longer belonged to Jennifer alone. Whatever was in it now had a new skeptic to confront, and it didn't like sharing. Living in the house had gone from unsettling to dangerous. What once whispered in shadows was now making itself known in the open, with force. Jennifer and Sean tried to maintain some semblance of routine, clinging to the idea that maybe, just maybe, things would calm down. They didn't. One night, Jennifer woke up suddenly. The room was pitch black, the silence thick. At first, she thought it was a trick of the dark, but then she saw it. A silhouette, a tall, solid shape stood beside the bed. Not a shadow caused by headlights or curtains swaying. This was darker than dark. An absence of light that seemed to suck the rest of the room into it. No face, no features. Just the unmistakable outline of a man, watching. She froze, unable to move. "Sean," she whispered. He didn't wake. "Sean," she said again, louder. She turned back. It was gone. The room was just as it had been. Quiet, undisturbed. But Jennifer's heart pounded in her ears. That thing had been standing over her. It wasn't a dream. She had seen it, felt it. The fear was no longer just hers. Sean began experiencing it too. Though ever rational, he couldn't dismiss what happened next. One night, just as they had drifted off to sleep, the locked bedroom door suddenly popped open. Not eased open, popped. The sound of the doorknob turning and the click of the lock echoed through the room, followed by the soft creak of the door swinging inward. Sean shot upright. He always locked the door, every night, without fail. No one else was in the house. Nothing had malfunctioned. They lay awake for hours after that, adrenaline burning through their veins. But the house wasn't done. Later that same night, well past 1 a.m., a deafening bang jolted both of them awake. It sounded like the front door had been kicked in. Sean leapt out of bed, instinct taking over. He grabbed the .45 he kept in his nightstand and began clearing the house room by room, upstairs, downstairs, even outside through the wide stretch of their 5-acre property. Nothing. No doors open, no windows broken, no footprints, no signs of forced entry. But the sound had been real. Jennifer heard it too. So had the dogs. Something wanted them scared, and it was succeeding. Sean, who had once rolled his eyes at the idea of spirits, now found himself guarding his home with a loaded gun against something he couldn't see, couldn't touch, and couldn't stop. The house wasn't haunted. It was hostile. Jennifer and Sean had done their best to protect their sanity within the chaos, but they hadn't expected the house to turn its attention toward their child. At first it was innocent. Their 3-year-old son had just begun learning to read, flipping through simple picture books and calling out names: star, moon, tree. Jennifer would smile from the kitchen, listening proudly as he sat cross-legged on the living room floor. But one day, she noticed something strange. He wasn't reading to himself. He was turning the book and holding it up, as if showing the pictures to someone else, someone who wasn't there. Sean watched, too, perplexed. Their son would name an object, then look up, pause, smile, and nod, as if someone had responded. He would whisper, pause again, then flip the page. He wasn't just talking to himself, he was interacting, conversing. Jennifer's heart dropped. She had experienced things. Sean had seen shadows. They had both heard voices and loud bangs. But this was different. Their son was engaging with it. Whatever it was. They tried to write it off. Kids had wild imaginations, right? Maybe he had an imaginary friend. That wasn't uncommon. But deep down, they both knew this felt different. There was a pattern to it, specific times, specific places in the house, especially in the kids' room, the same room where flies kept reappearing day after day. Jennifer began to fear the house wasn't just haunted. It was reaching out. And now it was touching what mattered most. "I was done," Jennifer later said. "You can mess with me, fine, but not my kid, no." The haunting had shifted from frightening to personal. A child, so innocent and unaware, becoming a possible target of whatever resided in those walls. The thought was unbearable. What if it escalated? What if he got hurt? Sean, once the rational protector, was now visibly shaken. "How do you protect your family from something you can't see?" he asked. "How do you fight something that walks through walls?" There were no answers. Jennifer and Sean had once hoped the spirits were simply remnants, memories, impressions, ghosts of love and grief. But this was intelligent, active, watching, choosing, and now it had chosen their child. That was the final line. They knew they needed help, real help, before it was too late. With fear now consuming every corner of their home life, Jennifer and Sean turned to the one option they had left: outside help. Paranormal investigators. Jennifer began reaching out to professionals, starting with one well-known name in the field. She sent an email describing the strange events, the escalating aggression, and her growing concern for her child. The response was curt and disheartening. "It's not worth my time," the investigator replied. She was stunned, disappointed, but not deterred. Eventually, her persistence led her to a more local group, the Fort Wayne Shadow Chasers, specifically a team known as the Para Sisters, who had built a reputation for honest, thorough investigations. Tina Lano and Jackie Hicks agreed to visit the house, accompanied by psychic medium Cheryl Fergus. When they arrived for their first investigation, Jennifer stayed. Part of her wanted validation. Another part just wanted answers. She watched as the team moved methodically through her home, asking questions into the silence, recording audio, using EMF meters to detect unexplainable electrical spikes. They weren't theatrical. They didn't shout or provoke. They listened. At one point, Cheryl paused in the hallway and looked toward the basement. "He's watching us," she whispered. They stayed the night, recording everything. The next day, they told Jennifer they'd like to return, with backup. Not more investigators, but Cheryl's husband, an electrical engineer. They explained that some of their EVP captures were so startlingly clear, so specific, that they suspected trickery. Maybe someone was playing recordings through hidden speakers. Jennifer was offended, but she understood. When the team returned a second time, Cheryl's husband swept the home from top to bottom. He examined the outlets, the attic, the basement, every crevice where a device could be hidden. He found nothing. Nothing but raw, inexplicable activity. In that second investigation, the group captured what would become the most compelling evidence yet. Clear EVP recordings. A man sneezing when only women were present. A desperate voice whispering, "Don't go," as Jennifer left the room. Disembodied footsteps. Cold spots, lights flickering in response to questions. They weren't imagining it. They weren't exaggerating it. It was real. Jennifer felt both relief and dread. The team's conclusion was sobering. The spirits in the house were not demonic, but persistent, protective, attached. The investigators explained that while they could bless the house and attempt a cleansing ritual, they couldn't guarantee results. "These spirits," Cheryl told her, "don't want to leave." They burned sage, They prayed. They circled the rooms with intent and energy. But afterward, Jennifer still felt the same weight pressing down. Nothing had changed, and the house wasn't done. Even after the blessing, the house refused to give them peace. The noises continued. The shadows remained. The whispers still crept through the walls when the lights were low. Jennifer and Sean were left with a devastating realization. They couldn't fix it. They couldn't coexist with something that had already claimed the house as its own, especially not something willing to shove her down the stairs. Twice. And so they left. It wasn't dramatic. There were no final encounters, no cinematic farewells, just quiet desperation. They packed up their things, gathered their child, and walked out. They never looked back. Jennifer's parents agreed to finish the renovations so the house could be sold. They didn't believe in ghosts. Not then. But the house had plans for them, too. Her parents worked on repairs during the day. One afternoon, while down in the basement, her mother noticed something strange at the foot of the stairs. A fly swatter. It was always kept hung up on a nail by the basement door, out of the way, unused. But now it was lying on the floor. "Did you knock it down?" she asked her husband. "No," he said, "I haven't touched it." A few days later, Jennifer's father was alone in the house. He was in the basement again when he heard the garage door open upstairs. Then, heavy footsteps across the mudroom floor. The door opened, closed. Then, clear footsteps circled through the kitchen. He grabbed a tool, ready to confront whoever had come in. But when he reached the main floor, no one was there. The garage door was shut. His truck was still the only vehicle in the drive. Another day, he locked the basement door before heading out. When he returned the next morning, the door was wide open. Jennifer hadn't said anything to her parents before they agreed to help with the house. She didn't want to scare them. But after their own experiences, they didn't need convincing. They now believed her, completely. The renovations were eventually finished. The house was listed. A realtor, fully aware of why Jennifer had moved out, took over the sale. Whether that information was ever shared with new buyers, Jennifer never knew. She hoped they were safe. She hoped the house had finally settled. But a quiet fear always lingered in her chest. The house had been sold again, once, maybe twice. But for Jennifer and her family, the haunting didn't follow. It stayed right where it always had been, inside those walls. Years after leaving the house behind, Jennifer received an unexpected email. A production company called New Dominion Pictures was developing a new season of A Haunting for the Discovery Channel. They were searching for true paranormal stories, and someone had passed her name along. Jennifer hesitated. Telling the story again would mean reliving it and putting it in the public eye. But she also saw an opportunity. Maybe by sharing what she went through, she could help someone else going through something similar. She agreed. The interview process began quickly. The producers were enthusiastic, asking for details about the events, timelines, emotional reactions. Jennifer opened up completely. She told them about the aftershave, the voices, the attic door, the basement, the stairs, the flies, everything. She was told the reenactment would follow her story closely. It didn't. When the episode finally aired, Jennifer and Sean watched in disbelief. Their truth had been twisted, scenes dramatized beyond recognition. The entity that Jennifer always saw as a faceless shadow was portrayed as a horrifying creature with exaggerated features like cornflakes with black paint on its face, she later joked, half amused, half embarrassed. The edits also reshaped Jennifer's personality. Through clever cutting, she appeared indifferent to the haunting's impact on others. At one point, she was made to seem dismissive of whether the new homeowners might be suffering the same experiences. That hurt the most. "I would care," she later said. "Of course I would care. They made me look cold, and I'm not." Even the actress who played her reached out after filming. "I could tell some of what they were asking us to do didn't match the script," she told Jennifer. "They changed things on the fly, told us to react differently than what was written." Sean, too, was frustrated. He had hoped for a factual telling, something that might support paranormal research or at least add credibility to real stories like theirs. But instead, the show opted for fear over facts. "Once you start adding things that didn't happen," Sean explained, "you risk making people think none of it was real. And it was. The real story was scary enough. One of the most terrifying experiences, the attic door slamming open, followed by the dog's aggressive reaction, was left out entirely. That was a huge moment, Jennifer said. The way my dogs reacted, you could feel the fear in the air. But dogs are expensive for production, so I guess they cut it. She had even sent real photos to a local newspaper, images of her dogs in the house with unexplained mist-like forms floating nearby. But online skeptics dismissed them. "She's just smoking in the house," someone claimed, pointing at what they thought was an ashtray. Jennifer laughed bitterly. "I have dogs. I don't smoke inside. People just want to find reasons not to believe." In the end, the show had taken her trauma and dressed it up in makeup and jump scares. What had been raw and real was turned into spectacle. And once again, Jennifer's voice had been overshadowed, this time by TV producers. In the years that followed, Jennifer didn't let the experience define her, but it never fully left her either. After surviving something so personal and unexplained, she found herself drawn more deeply into the world of the paranormal, not as a victim, but as someone who wanted to understand. She and Sean visited other reportedly haunted locations, old jails, asylums, and abandoned buildings. One of the most infamous was the Columbia City Jail. People claimed it was among the most haunted places in Indiana, especially the basement. Jennifer went in alone, recorder in hand, lights off, heart steady. Nothing happened. No voices, no touches, no shadows, nothing like her old house. "I never found another place like it," she admitted. "Nothing else even came close." Still, the curiosity lingered. And in 2022, a new opportunity reignited it. Jennifer had started a new job when she met Jeremy Golden, a colleague with a passion for podcasting. He ran The United States of Paranormal, a show featuring personal accounts and haunted history from across the country. When he found out about her experience, his reaction was instant. "You were on a haunting? You have to come on the show." She agreed, and this time she got to tell the story in her own words. No edits, no dramatization. Just Jennifer, a microphone, and the truth. The response was overwhelming. Listeners reached out. Some had been through similar things. Others just wanted to thank her for being honest, for not sugarcoating it, and for not letting it get sensationalized again. Soon after, Jeremy asked her to join the podcast as a co-host. She accepted. Now, Jennifer speaks to others who've experienced the paranormal. She listens with empathy, asks the questions she once feared herself, and helps tell stories that might otherwise be silenced or mocked. Through it all, her goal is simple: truth. Not ghost stories that chase ratings, not costumes or creepy sound effects, just real people, real voices, and real encounters with the unknown. She doesn't claim to have all the answers. She's not a medium. She's not a psychic. She's just someone who lived through something she couldn't explain and came out stronger on the other side. Looking back, Jennifer still wonders if the spirits in that house were ever malicious or just misunderstood. Was it grief that turned the Johnsons into restless shadows? Was it their unfinished love story that bled through the walls? "I hope whoever lives there now is okay," she says. "It's a cute house. I really hope it's quiet." But she knows in her bones that silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's just the pause before something returns.